Welcome to Inside the Marathon Project, the podcast that takes you inside the stories of the athletes, organizers, and dreamers behind this unique, one-of-a-kind distance race happening in Chandler, Arizona, December 20th and 21st. I'm your host, Steve Sievert. I'm going to be joined by Ben Rosario, the co-founder and CEO of the Marathon Project, in just a moment. And we are pleased to be welcoming in today's guest, JP Flavin, marathoner, accountant, and member of the legendary Hanson-Brooks Distance Project. We're going to get into training philosophy with JP. We're going to talk to him about why the Marathon Project is on his racing docket for 2025, and also a topic that I can't wait to explore, what it's like to compete in the fastest ever era of marathoning. With that, let me welcome in the aforementioned co-founder and CEO, Ben. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Steve. This is fun. I know you've recorded a couple of these without me, so I'm happy to be a fly on the wall for the most part on this episode, but maybe jump in here and there. And I'm excited to hear from JP. He's one of our top athletes, and we're excited to try to get him and a bunch of other guys under 210, just like we did last time, and quite frankly, as far under 210 as we possibly can.
Can't wait to make that happen in December. JP, welcome to Inside the Marathon Project. I'm going to start with an easy one. How are the legs feeling today?
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Legs are feeling good. Coming off the 20K this past weekend, it was first couple days back were a little brutal, but today was the first day where I was like, I can finally open up again and feel back to normal, which was nice.
And we were just talking a little bit about that race before we hit record. So the U.S. 20K Championships in New Haven, how did you feel that performance went for you?
Yeah, I was pretty happy with it. It was a fast field, fast day. I think just about every record was set for Americans. I think it was pretty deep. I averaged, 4:47 pace, which is what I was kind of shooting for. I went into it with a goal of like sub an hour, and I would be happy with it. And I ran, I believe, like 59:28, so even better than I was expecting. It's one of those days where the Americans, the field has gotten so great that no one really came back. I kind of was a little bit more conservative and just stayed around 4:45s for most of it. No one ever really came back besides maybe a couple guys. So just proves what the level's at now in the U.S. So I'm excited with that performance.
And when you say nobody came back, take us into that moment, because you know what you're capable of, you know what your training is like going into that race, and then you're at a moment in the event where you're seeing that gap grow a little bit, and you've got to make a decision, right? You've got to make a decision on the fitness that you brought into that race that day. Take us inside that from the 20K. What was going through your head as you were seeing that develop, and what was the decision that you had to make at that point?
Yeah, I think this how I've learned how to run over the years is that I know my body. I know what I'm capable of. You don't come down from altitude or anything like that. I know what I can handle. I know I could handle 4:45s for about a half marathon or so. And I like to be pretty conservative and be pretty not too aggressive, and I want to have legs at the end. So I'm not going to try to go out and run 4:35s for the first 10K and then hope I can hold it there. I would rather run 4:45s all the way through and just try to finish stronger. And I think that's one of my strong qualities, just knowing what my body can handle. I think I do a pretty good job of staying even throughout and making sure I don't go out faster than what I can handle.
And then what does that recovery look like coming off of a big race like that?
So it'll vary. New Haven's not very hilly. It's only a couple hills, nothing crazy. So just did 3 days of short singles, 10 to 12 miles. And then I'll probably work out sometime this weekend. So 4 days of recovery and then back to it.
Well, I want to take us back a little bit farther in your journey, maybe back to the New Jersey days. So you grew up in Toms River, New Jersey. Take us back to that time and how, as a kid in Jersey, you found running. What was your path to getting in the sport?
Yeah, so I didn't really grow up with a running family. Both my parents were athletes. They're both athletic. I've always been surrounded by sports. Grew up loving baseball. And where I'm from is like a historically great baseball town. And I always like did basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring, but didn't really have a fall sport to do. So my mom suggested I just do cross country just to keep busy after school, make some friends. So I was doing that in middle school. Did it my freshman year of high school, and was varsity my freshman year, and figured I should probably commit to the running thing full time. It's the only way I'll be a varsity athlete. I knew I was pretty self aware that I wasn't going to be a varsity baseball player for my freshman year. So I just kind of fell into the sport that way through just doing it, and kind of have grown to love it more and more, I'd say. Wasn't really a huge fan of running freshman, sophomore year of high school for sure.
What was the point where it turned, I don't know, kind of serious and you realized, hey, I might have a shot to do this as a collegiate?
I'd probably say like my sophomore, junior year. It was not really like, I didn't know many guys in high school who ran in college, but I remember, I think at a high school camp, a coach asked me if I was looking at any schools, and I said, no, should I? And started reaching out to a couple schools, emailed a ton, didn't hear back from a ton of them, and took a couple visits. I ended up at University of Dayton in Ohio, and I loved it there. It was the easiest commit ever, and I think that really helped me grow to love the sport there too.
And did you also spend some time at NC State in your collegiate days?
Yes. So I did 2.5 years at University of Dayton, and then I transferred to NC State. Dayton doesn't have sponsored track, so it's very difficult to qualify for NCAAs on the track side. And I kind of figured if I want to make a step up, I need to probably go to a school that has NCAA sponsored track. And I went into the portal just when it was like beginning to start to happen. With the portal's crazy now, but ended up at NC State with Coach Seaton and Coach Geiger, and loved it. Was there for 3 years, and it was great.
And what kind of encouragement did the coaches give you in terms of looking to pursue running as a pro?
They were always they knew who I was from the beginning. They knew I was always going to be, like, I was going to be okay in the track and on the cross country, but like even every day, my favorite day of the week was always the long run, and they always kind of knew I was going to be a marathoner, and they knew that's probably where I was going to be at my best. So, I mean, just my last couple of years, they kind of were trying to just get me better on the track so I could have some opportunities, and thankfully got to meet Kevin at a couple races at cross and regionals track, and reached out to him and scheduled a visit after my last 5th year of NCAA cross, and decided to forego the last season of track and just go out to Michigan and try to change it up a little bit.
So they saw the potential in you as a marathoner, but what about you? Did it take any coaxing, or did you feel like, yeah, the future for me in this sport is going to be a 26.2 miles?
I think I always knew it. I was always naturally just better at the longer stuff. I wish I was speedier. It'd be a lot more fun. It's a lot quicker. But I remember watching like the 2020 trials in Atlanta and just talking to someone the next day. It was like, I think I should be at the trials in 2024. And even on my visit with Hanson's, I remember saying like, yeah, I know I need to do some track stuff while I still can, but like my future is a marathon. Like I'm ready to probably do one this upcoming fall. And thankfully Kevin let me debut at Chicago with only being on the team for 6 or 7 months. So, and I think that's set me up for a nice progression into the marathon.
Yeah, you mentioned Kevin and you mentioned Hanson's. That's a great segue into my next question. You went on this visit. Obviously, you had a good impression because you ended up joining the team. But what specifically was it about that group that clicked with you and you said, yeah, this is the place for me?
Kevin and Keith both know how to coach the marathon. That's been apparent. I also got to talk to Coach Geiger, who's been around forever. He knows everyone. So he knew Kevin and had really good things to say about him. I loved the visit. Was great. Meeting all the guys, seeing all the paths and dirt trails around was a pretty easy sell in Michigan. Coming off of leaving Raleigh was always brutal in the summer, and I kind of like was ready to not melt in the heat for a summer. And Michigan's a little different. You kind of freeze in the winter here, but thankfully we have a great setup where we go to Florida in the winter, so to kind of avoid the snow a little bit.
Nice. Well, I want to let Ben jump in here because obviously he has his own experience with Hanson's, and the two of you can swap stories about Keith and Kevin or however you want to pursue this. But let me toss it over to Ben, and I'm sure he has a question or two for you.
Yeah, JP. So you may or may not know that I ran for the Hansons in 2003, 4, and 5. And in some ways, I think, you guys have probably made a lot of changes to the program. But knowing Keith and Kevin, I bet you there's a lot that's exactly the same as well. I loved it. I loved my time there. And like you, I ran a marathon right away. I ran Chicago the first fall I was on the team and qualified for the trials back in 04. I guess Chicago in 03, and then ran the trials in 04. So because I honestly don't know, I'm interested to see what training's like nowadays. When we were training, so this was sort of, you might call it the Brian Sell era, when we were hammering certainly 120 miles a week, meeting every day at 8 a.m. at the duck pond, going for our runs together as a group every morning, oftentimes sub 6 minute pace, 1 to 2 workouts a week in a long run. What else? That was the system, right? That was the system. Workouts at Stony Creek Metro Park, very, very strict workouts in terms of what pace you had to hit. Things like 3x3 miles, 5x2 miles, 2x6 miles. That was the system. Tell me how it's the same. Tell me how it's changed.
I mean, that's all about the same, I'd say, for the most part. Yeah, we do. We still meet at duck pond every day, or not every day, but most days. It's still pretty strict with like the pacing, stuff like that. Like, obviously, like me and Kevin will sit down before and like talk about marathon pace, like goal pace, and then the workouts will be set up like for a 3x3, like 3x3 minus 5, so 5 seconds faster than marathon pace. We'll do stuff like that. We still crank out high mileage. I think I got up to 130, 135 the past couple of builds. Still, I don't say we go sub 6 average for like our normal days, but we'll still get like pretty low. We'll average like 605, 610-ish, depending on the weather. I don't know how it was back then, but I've started to like add quality into my doubles. I'll find myself like just kind of running a little bit faster on doubles, and that's how I know I'm starting to get pretty fit, is when I don't really need the doubles as just to reset the body. I can kind of like average 6 at like 5:55 and get moving by the end, and I'm starting to feel good. Yeah, but it sounds like it's pretty much the same. It's a formula that works. I think that, and doing a lot of training with like Zach and stuff like that, he's really helped. Like we've kind of figured it out, and we know what works, and we know how to like manage our bodies and adjust to what we need to adjust day in and day out.
Yeah, one of the things that I think people don't know about the Hanson's team, even though they try their best to tell people, but you mentioned at the top, is really it's a beautiful place to run. So they've got the Paint Creek Trail, which is a beautiful flat crushed gravel trail. They've got Stony Creek Metro Park, which is a 6-mile loop around a lake that's marked every quarter mile. They've got dirt roads that are hilly and nice for long runs. Tell the folks a little bit about just how often you guys are on soft surfaces. I think people wouldn't realize that, being in suburban Detroit.
Yeah, I would say we're on soft surface probably like 5 to 6 days a week, maybe more. It's the only days are probably not on soft surface is probably workout days at Stony Creek Metro Park. But usually one way or the other, not every single mile is on soft surface, but we usually find ourselves on one of the trails or one of the dirt roads nearby. So yeah, that's usually like a big benefit for sure, and that helps recovery.
Awesome. And my last Hanson's questions, though I might pop in a second time, is Kevin still driving his Hummer around, taking your splits?
It is. He's still. It gets its break. Sometimes he's driving the van around, but sometimes there's a good chance the Hummer's in the shop as always. But it's still chugging along.
Nice. I love it. I love it. Okay, Steve, back to you.
Well, wait a minute. Apparently, that's been
Oh,
around for a while. So, love that question. But I want to pose a question to both of you because I want the athlete perspective and then the coaching perspective from you, Ben. So, you went through in pretty good detail what the Hanson program is like. So, how is it different from other programs? And JP, I know you've gone directly from college into Hanson-Brooks, but you talk with others, so and I'm sure you follow some things online as well. So you've got a decent idea of what other groups are doing. How does it differ from what you've seen other athletes doing at the marathon level?
I think a big difference with us is that a lot of our day, we don't really take easy days as easy as other teams, but I don't think we really need to. I think whenever I'm like on the circuit talking to the other guys, they're always saying that you guys hammer every day, which I don't. It doesn't feel like we are, but to them it certainly is. But a lot of the guys we're racing are at altitude, and they kind of have to recover differently than that. I think one big aspect that is a big advantage to us is that, especially with marathons, is that like we know the course going into it, and a lot of guys don't. Kevin and Keith always make it a point to drive out to or fly out to wherever course we're running, and we'll do the course maybe like a month or two before the race, just so you kind of have a feel for what the course is like the day of the race. And I think that's a huge advantage for races like Boston. Like I know when to expect the hills, when to maybe expect some wind, stuff like that. And I think that's really a huge part of it, where I know coming up this mile is going to hurt, but then I'll get that back the next mile. I think that's a huge advantage to us, is that having Kevin and Keith's knowledge, and they've been around certainly around the block, so they know most of the courses and kind of what makes it tick.
Ben, same question for you. Obviously, you've led your own group and with a marathon focus with Hoka NAZ Elite. How did your group differ from Hanson's, or maybe another question along those lines? What did you take from Hanson's to then develop your philosophy into NAZ Elite?
Yeah, well, JP mentioned one big difference is that, my group was in Flagstaff, and at 7,000 feet, I felt like we had to run slower on our easy days. And so I think that was a big focus for me, was making sure we did take our easy days easy so that we could get a lot of mileage. I would say overall, we didn't run as many miles as I did at the Hansons or as JP's running now. But I felt like the altitude was a part of that. And I felt like just my own personal philosophy was I wanted to get a lot out of the big days, and I wanted to be ready for the big days. And it's just a little difference, not a huge difference, but also I think, again, some of that can be attributed to altitude and what I felt about the powers of altitude and the way to best take advantage of those powers. And I think Kevin and Keith do a great job of taking advantage of what they have, which is sea level, and being able to run a little bit faster. That's an advantage. There's pros and cons to either. And then I would just say also, I just look, whenever you're a coach, you're taking some things from some people, some things from other people, right? And my time at Hanson's was awesome, but I was also coached by Greg McMillan for a while. I also worked with a buddy in St. Louis for a while, and I was just kind of a running nerd and absorbed a lot of different things. And so I think we did a lot more ancillary stuff, I would say, than I did there when I was there. Again, I don't know exactly what they do now, but we definitely had a big weight room program and a lot of form drills and a lot of strides and a lot of work on efficiency and athleticism, which was something that I, maybe added to my program. But I will say that I took from them exactly what JP was talking about. Really prided myself in being ready for the big days in every way possible, not only from a training perspective, but from a course preparation perspective. And so, Atlanta, which he mentioned, for example, where we ran really well in 2020 at the trials, I had been out there. I had seen every inch of that course. I had studied that course map. I had reached out to the people in Atlanta. I knew exactly how much each mile went up, how much each mile went down. And I prepared accordingly with the team, and we were ready for the demands of that course in a way that I think few people were, maybe except Kevin and Keith. So I took that from them for sure, and just their overall passion. And I always thought, subconsciously, I think JP would agree with this, you knew that Kevin was putting everything into this, and you knew that he was going above and beyond to make sure that you were prepared. And so I think as an athlete, in turn, you're going to do everything you can. And it's not like he's saying that. It's not like he's sitting there in a meeting saying, hey, I'm doing everything I possibly can, so you should too. It's just sort of the culture. And I tried to have that same philosophy, and I tried to take that same approach.
One follow-up for JP that I want to toggle off of what Ben just said. There is this philosophy in running. Certainly, I've heard it somewhat recently that be an athlete first, and then you'll be a better runner. So to Ben's point about the time you're spending in the weight room, the time you're spending on drills, is that still a mainstay of the Hanson's program, JP?
That kind of varies like person to person. The confession is that like I don't really do any of that. I run and then I go to work. I actually also work in accounting part-time. So I don't really have a ton of time to run, go to the weight room, stretch and stuff like that. But that's something that's kind of always, I've realized I haven't really needed when I've kind of tried to focus on that. It's sometimes like it just brings up like other issues. Like sometimes maybe I'll focus too much on it and then like it'll make my legs feel dead, stuff like that. So I understand that I may be like one of the few exceptions where it's like, maybe I don't need to do it. And it's been working that I don't hit the weight room. I don't really do a ton of drills, ton of stretching unless something's bothering me. But that's kind of with the Hanson's method or program. I'd say it's person to person. I think I'm probably one of the few guys who doesn't do anything in the weight room. Majority of other guys are doing lifting and stretching and stuff like that.
Well, I'm glad you brought up your part-time work because that was certainly something that we wanted to talk about. So how does a day in the life of JP come together then? Because you're training at a high level, 120 miles a week, you're working part-time as well. That requires a lot of time management, I would think. How do you balance all of that over the course of a day, course of a week, and how do you plan your month?
Yeah, it's certainly tricky. Thankfully, I think I've gotten the hang of it and just understand that this is the life I chose. I'm going to be busy. It's not going to be a lot of free time. So like a daily outlook for me is we meet up at 8 a.m. run. Depending on how far we drove to the run, usually I'm back in my apartment by like 9:30 ish. I try to get to work by like 11. Hopefully, depending on how far I'm going. It's a lot tougher to be on time when I'm doing marathon mileage, but like right now when I'm kind of not, I can sneak in, like get early and kind of front load the good graces because I know I'll be running late in like a couple months, like very consistently. But I'll work 11 to 5, and then most days I'm running after from the school that I work at, and then come home, eat dinner, maybe watch the Mets if I can, and then I'm going to bed and doing it all the next day. So it's tough.
And why does that work for you, or why is that your life structure where you're choosing to have a part-time job alongside choosing to compete at the highest levels of marathoning?
I think I've performed better when I'm busy, when I'm not constantly thinking about running. When I go to work, I'm thinking about the accounting that I have to do, which is a lot less fun than running. And then it makes me appreciate the running more. Like I look forward to doubling after work. It's kind of a nice reliever. So I'm not stressing about running 24/7. It's not the only thing I'm thinking about. I kind of put it to a side for 6 hours a day, and then I get to come back to it and enjoy it more. And I think it's made me appreciate running more. And I've just found that I'm more successful when I'm constantly busy. There was a time when I said maybe I should just go all in on running 24/7 and just like not work for a little bit. And I just found myself kind of not running as well. So I was like, I guess I have to be busy. And I also understand that running's not always going to be there 10 years from now. I need to kind of have a foot in the door for what's after the sport.
Besides the obvious, the numbers, right, that running and accounting have as similarities, what are other similarities between your profession as an accountant and your profession as a marathoner, or where do you see opportunities to sort of leverage experiences in both fields? I find that fascinating. I'm curious about that. Where are there some similarities?
That's it. I don't know. I don't really ever think about that, but it's just kind of, I guess, staying to it, staying strict, knowing you have to follow like a certain plan, a certain path. for the school I work for, like we're pretty set on having like we're on a monthly schedule of everything needs to be in for the month. So like the final board can approve all the financial planning stuff like that. And that's kind of similar to running, whereas you need to follow like the running schedule. You need to follow, like do your mileage, make sure you're ready to hit the big workouts, hit the big races. It's kind of like almost like end of month financials as well.
Interesting. Yeah, as they say, right? Plan the work and then work the plan. And then ideally you have success at the end. That's great. Well, let's segue into this then. Let's talk about the race. So the Marathon Project, you've got this circled on your calendar, December 21st. Simple question. Why this race for you this year?
Yeah, so I think timing is probably the easiest way to say it. Coming off of Boston, I ran 2:10:50, was thrilled, and obviously the most common fall race for any U.S. marathoner to do is want to say I want to do Chicago, but I kind of didn't really want to get right back into it. There's not really a ton of time in between. I think one thing that me and Kevin talked about after Boston is like, I know we can run a 2:10:30, but to get any faster, we need to get faster or in the shorter stuff. So we really wanted to focus on working on making 4:55s more comfortable by running 4:45s in workouts and kind of addressing like my weaknesses, which is just speed at this point. I don't think we really need to work on much more in the strength department. And Marathon Projects is in December, so it's a little bit later than most of the fall marathons. So it gives me more time to kind of test myself. So now I got to do New Haven 20K, and I'll get to see if I can PR again in the half marathon at a Philly distance run in September 20th, I believe. And so it's allowed me to kind of test myself and see how much faster we can get. I mean, Kevin and I talked and we said, if the results come in the races this summer with all the road racing, that's fine. But we really just want to work on getting faster and getting stronger in the sense of we need to be able to run 4:45, so 4:55s in a marathon feels easy. And I think that's what we have achieved. And Marathon Project is kind of a perfect fit for that, where I got to work a lot more on shorter sessions.
Have you talked about a goal yet, a specific goal time that you would have for TMP?
Not really. I imagine it would be 2:09:30, 2:10. I think it's also one of those things that that I've been around with Kevin, that we would also kind of see how workouts are going in the segment, that if we maybe adjust it, like if I'm crushing it and we think why not 2:09, then I think we'll aim for 2:09. But if I'm kind of cooked running 4:56s, then I'm very okay with settling for a 2:09:30. It's still, I can't be greedy with an 80-second jump. That's fine with me. So, I mean, I know sub 2:10 is certainly the goal, but any faster than that is a win, I'd say too.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say the other thing I really like about it for you, if I may, is just the idea of being up front. You know, that's the other thing, that it is so fast these days. And you talked about running 59 and change at New Haven, and Connor Mance runs 56. Yeah. It's totally crazy. But I think what we did last time at Marathon Project in 2020 was we had this giant pack of guys, yes, all trying to run fast for sure, but also all trying to win. And I really think that helped everybody that ran 2:09, because they were in it, and we're all competitors at the end of the day. And I'm wondering if the idea of being up front and battling even possibly for a win, because again, it's that similar field, a lot of guys in that like 2:09, 2:10 ability range. Does that excite you? And talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been a part of a marathon that's like featured me, really cared about me. I mean, obviously the elite coordinators, like they'd say that like, oh yeah, we love to have you. But I mean, I know who I am. I know who is on the circuit. Like they're going to feature obviously the guys who are running like US American record times. And I'm 9 times out of 10 happy to be there, but I'm excited to be a part of a race that truly is featuring me, that I can win. I haven't really ever been in a marathon where I've been competitive towards the front, and I'm excited. It's a new test. I don't really know how to run for a win in a marathon. I'm going to have to try to learn that, and maybe instead of just working with guys to 10th place, 15th place, saying like let's work together and run a a 2:11, like now I have to say, well, maybe I don't want to be your friend today and race you the last 5K and stuff. And so that's different too. It's a cool opportunity that I get to compete for a win. I haven't really done that in many races at all. I haven't really. It's always cool to be at the front and everyone's cheering for your name rather than being the 15th and getting the pity clap.
And what do you think about the course? I mean, it's a unique course, criterium style. Is there anything, maybe specifically you mentioned earlier about working on your speed, that you'll be looking to change or tweak slightly in your training to be prepared for trying to run that 209 on what is a very fast tarmac?
Yeah, I mean, that's half the reason why we were training so fast in this summer was that I need to be ready to run fast because one thing that I've been good at in the past is using hills and kind of knowing the course and knowing tangents and stuff like that. But that's not really necessarily a huge part of the marathon project. It's just kind of being able to lock in a pace. And I think that's also something that I'm going to probably work on a bunch, is just making sure, rather than getting aggressive, maybe staying more flat and even, and then trying to pick it up at the end of reps, and it's similar to that.
You've been making some incredible progress in the marathon since you started. I think you started at 2:13 in 2023, then you dropped down to 2:12. You mentioned earlier the 2:10:50 at Boston. So there's just this steady progression. And to your point, if that sort of curve holds, you could be looking at 2:09 at the Marathon Project. Is there any one specific aspect of your training that has evolved that you think is responsible for that steady progression?
I don't know. I was never really expecting to be this fast of a marathoner. It was always more so going pros. Like, it's an opportunity I can chase. And if I can run a 2:13, 2:14, then it's a great career. I never really expected to be here in the first place when I started running in Toms River in high school. So but I would say that maybe just, I think quality days, day in and day out, are really been adding up for me. And I think that's just made me stronger as a whole, is that I almost feel like every day is a quality day. And I think, or every day has to have a reason. And I think that's really paid out I think I'm starting to see the results of it for doing it 2 to 3 years in a row now with the Hansons. And I think that's really, I'm starting to reap from the benefits for that.
As I mentioned in the open, I wanted to talk about the age in which we're finding ourselves, this fastest ever era of the marathon. And the numbers, you're a numbers guy, so you'll appreciate this. The numbers are just bonkers, right? The 2:05 feels like the new 2:10, and the world record is 2 hours and 35 seconds. That's just on the men's side. You're seeing, similar, just gigantic breakthroughs on the women's side. And I just sit back as a kid who loved this sport and grew up watching the likes of Frank Shorter and Bill Rogers and Dick Beardsley. And I'm thinking, my gosh, I mean, their times, it just seems so dated at this point. What's it like as an athlete who is out there, putting that, 2:10:50 at Boston, not all that long ago, would have won some pretty big races. What's it like from an athlete's perspective to be competing at a time that is just incredible, for lack of a better word?
It's hard to describe. I mean, you don't really think about it when you're in it, because I don't know, like, it's been this way since I've gone pro, really. It's been just gone steadily faster. I mean, probably in 2023, a 2:10:50 probably meant you're top 5, top 10 in the US, but now it's top 15, top 20, and you need to be almost sub 209 to compete for like a spot to make a world's or an Olympic team. So it's just kind of knowing that if everyone else can raise the bar, then you can too. It's just finding ways you can, and understanding that maybe you can push the limits more with all the new shoes, all the new tech, all the new supplements and drink mixes and stuff like that is always like a new way to kind of push the envelope. Maybe going using shoes for like doubles and to go faster, and kind of, it's also helping with recovery. So you kind of think about the times being that much faster, but then you can't dwell on it, because if you do, you're going to get left in the dust anyway. So.
And you mentioned the shoes and the supplements and just training philosophies and how you use the shoes in training, for example. What among those levers are you pulling to try to capitalize on your potential?
Yeah, so Brooks, their racing shoes have come such a long way, even from since I've been a pro in the past 3 years. The new Hyperion Elites have been amazing. I think they've really helped me just run faster, recover better. I'm very thankful for Brooks. Their trainers are great. I've been, knock on wood, healthy ever since I've been here. Haven't really had to deal with many injuries. Maybe just a day off here and there. That just is just part of the sport. And I know I've gotten lucky with, I know a lot of marathoners have to experiment with like drink mixes for marathons. And thankfully I've been using Marvin. That's been fine. And I haven't had any issues mid race. So I'll take that. And that's all you can ask for, really.
I mentioned a couple of my idols growing up as a kid that helped get me into the sport. Were there some runners that you admired as you started to get into running as a middle schooler and a high schooler? Who were like some contemporaries that you looked to back in the day for some inspiration as you became a runner?
I mean, so growing up in Jersey, there wasn't like a ton of like local runners. Hoka and JNY were always guys that I thought were like super cool. And I'm actually good friends with like a couple of them now. So that's kind of been a full circle moment that I probably wouldn't have believed as a high schooler. Yeah, there wasn't a huge group of like runners that I would have to I got to look up to. It was kind of not really hugely popular around me. But I would say like the Hoka NJ and Y guys. There's a local running shop run by Craig Siegel. I always looked up to him. I always thought he was super cool because I knew he ran D1 in college, and I thought that was like the coolest thing freshman to sophomore year. So it's been a I would say like the Hoka and maybe and Craig from the Outpost are the guys I looked up to growing up.
Okay, so maybe you could be one of those guys that a younger runner looks up to. Because what I find fascinating about your story is you're sort of nonchalant about it. But, as I was getting into this, I would have been happy running 2:13, 2:12 for a marathon. You've put a 2:10 on the board now, and you're talking 2:09. So you've already exceeded your expectations, which that has to feel good. Yeah. So what would you say to a kid who is in a similar situation? They're in high school, they're not lighting it up, they're not breaking the tape, but they love the sport. And they're thinking, could I do this in college? Could I do it later on? What advice would you give them?
Keep at it. I think one thing is that I've always been a hard worker. I've always liked to push myself day in, day out. And there's plenty of other guys too, like me, who have been not great in college and then have just found success in the marathon. That's one of those things that you can kind of teach yourself and kind of how to grind. And the grinders will find a way to shine, especially in the marathon. I think that's one thing that I've learned with myself, with seeing other guys that I know too, who weren't as good in college and then got to the roads and really started lining up, is that just keep grinding and eventually you'll see the results.
You mentioned the grind. That was another question that I have for you. So the grind could be the label for marathon training, right? It is just the amount of miles that you have to put in, the recovery that's necessary. It is the very definition of a grind, particularly because it takes multiple weeks to get there. And on top of that, you're putting pen to paper and doing Excel spreadsheets and everything else. So you've got a layer on top of that grind. How do you stay motivated? What gets you through that? Because, there are certain points where it's certainly a lot, and you're like, how do I just get through this? How do you power through? What are your strategies? What's your mindset?
Just thinking that everyone who supported me, my family has been very okay with me pursuing running in college. It didn't always make the most sense. Why would I go to Dayton, Ohio, coming out of New Jersey? And then why would I forego working in a financially sound accounting job, but instead allowing me to go pro and kind of run broke a little bit for Hanson's? And so kind of making it pay off for them too. I think they've loved watching me run, and I think I almost owe it to them to keep running well. It's kind of, it's hard to describe just the payoff that you get at the end of a marathon. It's exhausting for 25 miles, probably even longer, but there's nothing like that last quarter mile when you realize you've had 3 months of work pay off. And just knowing that you're working towards that and just thinking about day in, day out, like the sub 210, sub 212, like the daily goals really makes it pay off.
I'm going to jump in because we're talking about the grind. And we talked earlier about the grind that is training for the Hansons, right? And with that program and the daily grind. And you've been there for 3 years. So you've also seen Zach Panning do some monster sessions, I bet, as he was preparing for Orlando, among other things. Tell me the best Zach Panning workout you've seen during your years in Michigan.
There's been a bunch.
I mean, this is FloTrack. This is nerdy people watching this, and I mean that in the best way. So let's hear something crazy.
I'm trying to think. He's done some. So we always do, like the simulator was one. I think so for he was training for Worlds. I don't know like the exact splits, but instead like it was kind of tough to find like a half marathon that we usually try to do where you do 10 miles of marathon pace. Last 5K, you rip it. So Kevin and Keith organized like a 16-mile route around Stony Creek, and he kind of like just went. I don't want to even know. I feel like I'm going to say it wrong, but he ran fast, and it was like everyone. I mean, we all knew. I was like, he's ready to run at Worlds, and he showed us correctly. I mean, that was no joke what he did.
What was he closing in? What do you remember? What he was closing in?
Probably like 40 lows, 30 is high. That may not even be. That may be too slow. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but
I bet he was faster.
Crazy. It's also hard to say because half the times he's doing all these crazy workouts, I'm like behind him, so I'm not really sure what he's doing. And then I'll like on the cool down, I'll be like, yeah, like I felt really good about today. And then he'll say his splits. I was like, you know what, never mind. I don't really feel that good anymore. It's he'll do some stuff that'll just like embarrass you. It's kind of tough. He's done some crazy things, and it's been training with him has certainly helped my level, and being able to run with him every day in and day out has taught me a lot and has made me a stronger runner for sure.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I didn't mention earlier that I took from Kevin and Keith was just that team culture and how important it is and how much you mean to one another if you do it right. I'm wondering how gutting it was for you guys when Zach didn't make that team in Orlando, because it felt like he should have. It felt like he was one of the 3 fittest guys. And tell me a little bit about what that was like for you as a teammate and collectively as a team, what you guys did to lift him up.
Yeah, it was really tough because, I mean, we all knew you don't really know during the race like what's going on. So you kind of after you kind of learn. And I actually had to step off. I had a hamstring cramp at mile 23, and so I had to. And the officials thought I was having like a heat-induced stroke, so they pulled me. And once they touch you, you can't keep running. So I was on like a side tent, and one of the aides was kind of helping us, and they were saying like Zach's like in the lead, and then finding out that it kind of fell apart at the end was pretty heartbreaking, just knowing and seeing what he did for those like 3 months leading into it. We were in Florida living all in the same house that winter and putting the work in and day out, and I knew how much it meant for him. So it was tough to see that it didn't happen, and it just kind of shows how brutal the sport can be, is that nothing's really owed to you. But I mean, we were all there for him. I mean, you still have to celebrate a top 10 finish at the trials. I mean, this is no joke. It's a great field. So Brooks had a little party after that we all got to celebrate. And obviously we were all kind of bummed for him, but we still had to celebrate. Like a top 10 finish is nothing to be ashamed about.
I'm curious about what success looks like for you going forward, particularly since we talked about how you're already exceeding some of your expectations. Has that led you to reconsider what your future in running looks like and what ultimately you want to achieve in the sport before potentially you tap out and say, I'm going to do this accounting thing full time?
Yeah, it's for sure. I mean, just after Boston, I kind of had to like take a step back and be like, you're in it now. Like you can compete. Like you need to owe it to yourself to go all in, and that you belong to compete. It was one of those things that now I'm going into Boston, I never really thought about like trying to like maybe get onto a team, someone like on a world team on an off year or like an Olympic team. But now it's kind of changed where like I had to like look in the mirror and kind of say like, no, you need to like, you owe it to yourself to go all in. Like you need to compete. I belong there. And that was kind of like the craziest affirming thing about Boston was like, I know I belong in the top of the US field. And I think I'm starting to prove it to myself and others that I know I can hang. I know I can compete. I don't know. It's one of those things I kind of have to start being a little bit more strategic about what races I want to do. And Marathon Project is a great fit because I know I can time chase there and maybe sneak up on the list and the US list a little bit. And really maybe reset some goals that I didn't think I had to set before. It's a cool spot to be in. I was like, I didn't realize I had to take myself to this next level, but I'm ready to compete at the next level. It's starting to be a new change for me for sure.
Well, I'm looking forward to meeting you in Chandler. I hope the training goes really well leading into that race, and hope nothing but the best for you, because you're right. That's a great opportunity to lay down a fast one, and I know it's going to be set up to do so. Really do appreciate your time, JP. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, JP. Tell Kevin and Keith I said hi.
Will do.
One race, one project, one pursuit. It's the Marathon Project. And we'll be back next week on FloTrack with another episode of Inside TMP.